Hi, my name's Dee, your professor of woo-woo, and welcome to Untitled Tarot, and welcome to a very special guest. If you're aware of any of the magical communities online, then you may well know this very esteemed gentleman who promises me that he can rant like Alex Jones. So it is with no small amount of trepidation I introduce D H Thorne.
Nice to meet you, man. It's good to have me on your show. I guess that makes it fun for both of us. But yeah, I like the way you call that woo-woo. I like that. You know, it's a good way to look at things. Like it disarms people right off the bat.
It's the way I look at the hocus pocusy. Again, you can tell it's because it's just been there since I was like knee high to a grasshopper. So to me, it's normal, and it worries me when people get freaked out by it.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the natural state of humanity for thousands and thousands of years, and now all of a sudden people are scared of even let's say you want to be skeptical about it, that's fine, but they're scared to even approach it, you know, to even question it even in a friendly skeptical, an open skeptical way. It's like they don't even want to hear about what this could be. In a lot of cases, I have people who, when I tell them what I do, you know, they're just kind of like, you know, it's like I told them that I don't know, something that's quite troubling to them, and they just go, okay, sure, that's great, yeah, you know.
To be honest, touch wood, I have rarely had that. So I've had that reaction from a few people, but normally it's been able to talk round and just go, well, this is me, take it or leave it. But yeah, I've heard some of the, when you've discussed this on your shows, it seems a lot more pronounced in the States.
I'm going to say I've had my fair share of both. You get a lot of people who are accepting, but when they accept, you can tell. I mean, I read people for a living, so when people talk to me, I can usually tell whether they're just blowing smoke up my ass and being polite, or if they actually think it's fascinating, or if they're really turned off by it. So I'm going to say it's pretty close to 50-50. I'm going to say it really depends on the circle that you're walking in. If you're in the right group of people, of course, they're going to be very interested. If I go to a crystal rubbing, yoga pants wearing, new age shop, you're going to get a lot of ooh la la's until I tell them, yeah, I tend to work with an upside down pentagram more than a right side up one. And they go, oh! and then you get the other side of that, so I'm sort of a pariah no matter where I go, between politics and spirituality, and everywhere I go, people just look at me and go, why can't you be normal? Like, just be normal about something. No, thank you. I feel like I get way more energy and power out of being unusual than being like everybody damn else.
I was going to say, because you really enjoy being that as well, don't you?
To a certain degree, absolutely. I mean, I'll have to send you my chart sometime. I think you're better with that stuff than I am. Maybe you can tell me what the deal is. But yeah, there's definitely a piece of me that says, maybe it's that I'm a little bit of Plutonian. I have the first house, I have Pluto in it, and it could be that, but that just gives me maybe that edgy, dark outward appearance. But I don't know really what it is. I have a very strong lunar influence in my, I'm a Cancer moon. I have an Aries sun. So I'm outgoing, but also very deep in reading on the inside. And so I tend to disarm people with that. But I also tend to like to be a little bit, I'll say in walking around real life, I'm most shocking in how I appear. I dress like you see in my videos. I don't wear colors. I don't wear any of that stuff. I'm always dressed in black. I've been a goth since I was a teenager, not the Edward Scissorhands style, but more the more reserved kind. Mm-hmm. So I walk around everywhere and people look at me like I'm some kind of a weirdo right off the bat. But I'm more reserved in public, and online, I guess, because of the way these things work, I'm a lot more chatty and a lot more, maybe my ADHD kicks in. I can't stand the silence of a video call. I feel like you got to fill up every inch of the air with something. So that's where the Alex Jones rants come in. So.
Well, it also makes you perfect for radio if you ever get a chance to do it, because
sure, I guess, yeah.
Although from the sides, I think both of us would that statement. Now, true to your contrary nature, When I first contacted you, I was asking you about some of your magical workings, as in if you had worked with the Shem HaMephorash and the Goetic spirits, and how the relationship between the practitioner and the angels and the spirits would differ. And of course, you wrote back and said, yeah, I don't quite do that.
Mm-hmm. So as always, I'm unorthodox. I am not a bookworm occultist. My philosophy is kind of the opposite. I will use some of that stuff as guides to get me into, we'll say, the ballpark of what I'm interested in. But my work is generally entirely intuitive in nature, based upon a non-dual framework. So I'm very well, I'm not even gonna say I'm well read, but I'm well acquainted with the non-dual philosophies. I usually, I've always had these understandings, and so that is sort of the we'll say that, I guess, the praxis, the origin point of my work comes from that. And then as I delve into other things, I see through that lens, and it is a lens, admittedly, through that lens into these other traditions and paths, and I take what is interesting and I leave the rest. I'm not interested in following a tradition. I look at the Goetia as, it's basically, some people are going to not like this, but it's pretty provably true. It's basically the Necronomicon of Christian demonolatry and demonology. It's
okay, yeah.
Generally, it's generally made up stuff. The Solomonic stuff is generally, I'm not saying there's nothing valid in it. Just like with the Necronomicon, there's a lot of valid, especially the Necronomicon has very good ritual symbolism that was taken from tantric and other methodologies, and planetary magic in particular.
So you're talking about the Simon Necronomicon.
The Simon Necronomicon, yeah. So I sort of equate them. I mean, yeah, the Simon's more contemporary and it's more provably false, I guess. But it's based. Whoever made it obviously knew ritual magic very well, and it wasn't just like some Hollywood, or just some author just made a fake. Someone knew how to do planetary magic, in particular planetary ascension magic. Necronomicon, you're working through the different planets to ascend through what they teach you. It's just theurgy with Sumerian gods, and they make it a little bit spooky and whatever. And the Goetia, not to be too flippant about it, because I use it, but I don't use the Solomonic stuff in it. I'm not coming at it from a Christian perspective. I don't come at it from the perspective of that there's angels and demons and there's a god and a devil and all. That to me that's just one mythology to explain something that is, we'll say, egregoric. Everything's egregoric. Yeah. You're an egregore, I'm an egregore. And so we have a lot of control over what those egregores are like, because egregores feed upon attention and awareness and knowledge and interaction, but we also shape them as we do this in the collective conscious, if you will. So Christians back in the Middle Ages, when the Goetia itself was coming around, they would have had their folk, legends and just vague remembrances of pagan, heathen, native European traditions, shall we say. And they would have demonized them, so that, Christians at the time, we have this misperception that Christians were so opposed to magic they would burn you at the stake if you even thought about. What they really didn't like was any kind of magic that threatened we'll say the Christian church, right? Yeah. So if you could do Christian magic, so you could although it was frowned upon, you could sort of get away with working with other spirits if you saw them within that framework. So many of the people of the period would have seen, we'll say, I don't know, like a god like Zeus or Artemis or any of these spirits. They would have found a way to see them as angels or saints or something, so that they could have, and you'll even see in Catholic religion, there's analogs between the saints and in some cases and some. So they would have done the other thing. They would have done the same thing for the bad guys, or they would have demonized pagan gods that they couldn't so easily do that with, and so we end up with a lot of course I got phone calls right now. We end up with a lot of charlatans creating grimoires for people that contain fact and fiction in maybe equal measure, just like the Necronomicon does. You have things about the Necronomicon that are valid, such as especially the methodology is valid. You can find that's a planetary form of theurgy, in my opinion. And in the Solomonic system, that is a valid way. The structure by itself is somewhat valid. Working with the identity of something, calling it into yourself, or into either evoking or pulling it out of you, or invoking and bringing it into you. That's a valid way. But I won't use any of the stuff. I won't use any of the I don't use the triangle of art. I won't scold them and all this stuff. I don't find that necessary at all.
I think it's rude. I mean, I don't think I've said it yet on the channel. I know I've discussed it with friends of mine, but the traditional way of summoning the spirits and beat them around the head with the names of God until they beg you to stop and then go and do what you ask them is downright rude. That's not how you make friends.
That's true. And I would say that actually the focus of my understanding has a lot to do with shadows, shadow work, shadow people, Jungian shadow archetype stuff. And I see those goetic spirits as the Christian shadow, okay, of the period. Okay, these are all the things that they didn't like and were afraid of. So you have these divinities that taught the sciences and things, and like that's something that a bad guy would do. Well, yeah, to their mind, the sciences were not quite so good to them in a lot of ways.
Let's think about Renove going around spreading peace and diplomacy. Well, that's going to be against some state somewhere, isn't it?
Yep. And so there's a lot of that going on. And let's not forget that the Goetia, as we understand it, is sort of, it comes after Johann Weyer's hierarchy of demons, or however he called it, pseudomonarchy of demons, the false hierarchy of demons. So it comes after that, and his work comes after a lot of other stuff. So you get this buildup, and then some people even argue that Weyer left out important stuff because he didn't want people using it. And there's, what, at the end of the day, my understanding is that none of this power is external to you. It's all internal. In fact, the world that you see outside is really taking place inside. You think it's outside because that's how your relationship with it feels.
Yeah.
But the experience itself is happening within your consciousness, and consciousness is God. Okay, that's you. Okay, your divinity, your God. It's an impersonal God. It's not a person, like a Yahweh would be a personification of the Tetragrammaton, which is actually an impersonal entity. Like if you go to Hasidic Judaism, real Kabbalah, the deep Kabbalah, I'd love to get to know someone who's deep into that, because they don't talk about it openly. But I believe personally, they have a very pantheistic view where all is God, all is Tetragrammaton, and Tetragrammaton is more impersonal, but it can be personified as the Father or whatever else. So that's consciousness to me. Consciousness is in the Advaitin tradition, we'll say consciousness is the Brahman, is the Atman. It's all the same unified divinity, and it's impersonal. Well, we personify it as we coalesce out of the higher conscious of the deepest dream state, which is the more awake state, to the sleeping state, which is the more what we call awake. We personify divinity in this form, in that form, in the form of D, in the form of Nyarlathotep or Baal or whatever spirit you want to work with. So it gets personified into these egregoric things that exist in a collective consciousness, if you will. They're very real. Like, some people misunderstand what I'm saying. They think that I'm saying they're all just imaginary friends. What I'm telling you is your imaginary friends, yes, even the little goofy ones when you were a kid, they were real too. You just don't understand what they are. You think of them as, I made them up. But in a real way, you're actually evoking them and you're discovering them out of your divinity. That's how I see it. So I have a very unorthodox view, but then again, a lot of people resonate with it because I think it does draw a lot of similarities to other people's understandings. And I think if I have an advantage at all, and if I'm interesting at all, it's because I am a relative newcomer to the bookwormy side. But I have a lens which is well developed. It's not something that I just made up one day, and it's not, and I don't come from a dogmatic tradition. I'm not a Hindu. I'm not a Christian. I'm none of those things. So when I look at these things, I'm more inclined to strip out what I recognize as superstitious symbolism, and try to get to the more, I'm going to say psychiatric, but I have to preface that word with the understanding that psyche once meant spirit, and it didn't mean what we use it as today. So with a psychiatric understanding. So psyche and spirit are so I call it psychophysical and psychospiritual. Psychophysical is the material world that you think is real. It's really an illusion. And the psychospiritual is also an illusion, but it's a spiritual illusion. The astral and the material are both illusory reflections of the same enigmatic, unknowable in the human sense reality, but you can know it in a spiritual sense. So I'm kind of getting around and around here, but I like to approach things from that. I like to look at these, instead of assuming that there's a literal hell with a literal Satan or demon or something sitting in charge of it. I recognize that these are allegorical metaphors for a spiritual truth that is real. There is a hellish state of existence that we can all be in. We can be that. We don't have to die to go there. It's not a place. It's a state of psyche, a state of spirit, and we can be there. And there are intelligences there, just like there's intelligences here, and they appear separate, but they're really all the same unified whole, just expressing itself through different dimensions of potential. It's all the same. So, of course, this really pisses off a lot of people, because even on the so-called left-hand path, there's a lot of ideologues and dogmatic belief. There's a lot of theism, if you will, people who want to worship things. And I don't have a problem with reverence. And even the word worship by itself is innocuous, but people fall in worship in a way where they submit, and instead of, so you can venerate, you can be respectful, you can say, hey, I know that you're superior to me at this skill and I respect that, but you're not my God, and I'm not going to worship you as a God, but I will give you offerings and respect you and treat you with that. So getting back to what you said, I'm kind of taking a long route around to it, but back to what you said about being rude to a spirit.
Slow down 1 second.
Okay, sure.
Because I must admit, in everything that you've just said, you've knocked the legs out from about my next 4 questions that I was going to ask you. So this non-dual nature, and I think you have just expressed it, but I want to spell it out, because I don't think my channel viewers are necessarily sort of neck deep in magic like you and I can be at times. So the psychological model and those are definitely external entities, valid personalities in their own right. By the way that you're saying it, and I have to say this is my position as well, it's a ridiculous separation, because both things are true. Both things are true statements depending on the perspective of what you are looking at the situation. Of course, it's all in your mind. Of course, they're real and valid.
It's kind of like, yes, they're imaginary and they're deadly seriously real at the same time. And before, remind me of that, because I just want to go back to what I was saying before. That's why I don't think it's right to be rude to them and boss them around, because it's literally parts of your own shadow you're talking to. You're trying to evoke out of yourself. So when most people, when they approach demons, unless they're already coming from a balanced place, it's because they actually probably have a darker thing they're trying to there's something that's imbalanced. They don't feel whole. They feel like they're a bad guy. They feel like only the evil side will talk to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're usually, I don't want to make it too of a broad brush, but that's
I was going to say, I would challenge that one slightly, but I do see
there's definitely, because I didn't come at it from that perspective, but a lot of people do. Most people who come to me with that, for whatever reason, they feel, on the dark side, and they don't feel like they can access the light side. And so there's a little bit of a shadow going on. There's a little bit of a denial. There's a little bit of shadows cause us, through ignorance or fear or guilt or doubt or whatever, to behave a certain way. And if you don't feel confident or good about yourself, maybe you're more inclined to reach out to one side or the other for that. But I noticed that very often people work with those spirits because they're looking for that darker answer. They're not looking for an angel to judge them and give them the thing that they want. They're looking for a demon to go, it's good that you like to have sex all the time. Let's help you get laid, you know, to be blunt, you know, and that's indicative of a shadow of shame about the issue, where they don't feel like they can approach an angel for it because they feel like the angel, because they feel like deep down inside, hidden deep down inside, it's wrong when it's not, but that's what the demons are there for. So what I'm getting at is what we're doing when we're working with any spirit is we are externalizing something. We're personifying something that is part of us already. And by us, I don't mean just me. I mean the collective, the totality of divinity. And we're externalizing it so that we can talk to it. Okay, so you know, it's sort of like in a movie where a guy might have, you know, like Fight Club. Take Fight Club as a great example. Tyler Durden is an externalization of the person he wishes he was. So he externalizes him into his as an egregore, into his reality, talks to it, and confronts it, and then integrates it in the end. And that is when he achieves synthesis and becomes the one, becomes a much more elevated being because of it. So by doing this with these demonic entities, by saying, you know, Baal or Lucifer is out there, you know, we're externalizing something that maybe we don't want to confront in ourselves, or maybe we do, we want to be more like, but whatever it is, we're externalizing something and then using theurgy to bring it back into us gradually by behavioral changes and behavioral activities. So it's very psychiatric. A big piece of it is, and that's the self-help side. Then you have the whole, like, let me, you know, manifest my desires through magic with them as well. That's a whole other layer of what's going on. So what was it you said before that I said I'm going to get right back to it and I forgot it?
Do you know, I've forgotten now as well. Well, we were talking about the people have that discussion within magic. Is it a psychological process? Is it external entities that you are doing, that you're interacting with? And my answer to both of them is, of course it is. You know, whichever one. But I was interested in what you were saying about the egregores, because you're right. Comparing the Goetic literature to the Simon Necronomicon, which multiple magicians will turn around and say they've had fantastic work with. I read it when I was.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah. There was a certain something in it, but it didn't light that fire in me. I was way too much into my Greek gods at that point. So, you know, and I read some H.P. Lovecraft. It can stay over there.
And it's only loosely related to Lovecraft. You can actually take all the Lovecraft out in the Necronomicon. The Simon Necronomicon becomes a Sumerian book of planetary magic. And it's in a way, that's part of its brilliance in marketing. And then there's the Lovecraft egregores as well, which I've worked with those egregores successfully, and they've been useful. But I sort of put them in a more playful place, perhaps. I don't treat them quite as literal, because they're as egregores, they're much younger. They're like Superman era versus, you know,
now I have got faith in that Superman egregore. It's going to go.
It's real. It's real. They're all real.
Are you aware of the meme of Lil Cthulhu?
No,
it's like a little tiny cuddly Cthulhu that's about.
I've seen them.
I've just got visions of you sat there, you know, candle going and what have you, summoning little Cthulhu.
Not quite. That's not. I mean, that's what I made it sound like. That's not quite what I mean. I mean that when I'm feeling bored with, and when I say real, I put it in quotes, the real magic, I'll approach the Lovecraftian stuff because it's a little bit more inspiring to me, because it is so, because Lovecraft touched on something that was really essential, especially to our current era, this unfortunate nihilism that's creeped into things, this feeling of hopelessness, this feeling of the universe doesn't care about us. And instead of seeing that as like, woohoo, I'm free, I don't have to worry about a God judging me, they see it as, oh, woe is me, I'm just a little insignificant nothing. And so these other, in a way, Lovecraft did sense real entities in a way. He sensed entities that were not personified yet, and he created masks for them. He created things that we could integrate using them. So the general egregore of madness, which we have in other cultures, of course. And we do see, if you really pick apart Lovecraft's work, I don't know if he meant to do it or not, but you can draw corollaries to deities in other cultures very clearly. You have Azathoth, which is like the Brahmin or personification of chaos itself, primordial chaos, which was both impersonal and personified as a primordial deity in Greek lore. You have, madness and dreams, which is, Cthulhu, who's a very minor deity. You have Nyarlathotep, which is like the soul of the gods, which is the personified consciousness, the Lucifer, Jesus, embodiment archetype. You have Yog-Sothoth, which is the all-encompassing consciousness in everything. That's the non-dual, like imagine the same consciousness that you and I are filled with being aware of itself equally, so that I'm aware of you and me at the same time equally. That's like Yog-Sothoth. So you're one of his eyes, I'm one of his eyes. And this is why it's fascinating, because whether Lovecraft realized it or not, maybe I'm just projecting my own understanding onto it, which is fine. But I find it really interesting that you can do that successfully, and they line up very well. So you get like that holy trinity, but it's like an unholy trinity of the God, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, with those three high archetypes, which are kind of like the three most powerful ones in the mythos. So yeah, so I mean, one thing I'd like to point out, a lot of people listening, especially if they're not into the woo-woo stuff, as you put it, I am very much opposed to superstitious woo. As a literal belief. Superstitious woo to me is when people take literally the mythologies or the ghost stories, even for that matter, and they fail to see the symbolism, the mythology, the what use they have. They think that there's a literal, I mean, there might be a literal place called Mount Olympus, but I mean, they think there's a literal Mount Olympus with literal gods standing on it that literally have bodies and this and that, and that they come to earth with lightning bolts and all. That isn't to say that there isn't material interaction. What's that?
An egregore of that.
Right. That isn't to say that like just today, I had an experience with my familiar, and I was kind of feeling, like we all sometimes go through that, like, what is really going on here? And I asked my familiar for a sign of its presence, and I was very specific in what I wanted, because I'm usually not like that. And a second later, it literally happened. And I was like, whoop, get some blood. You're getting, and I was like thanking it, because sometimes I go through these periods because I am trying to be so rational that I'll rationalize myself out of trusting what I'm doing. Yeah. It does happen. But especially in this modern era, because I refuse to become superstitious. I refuse to believe anything that is clearly like Harry Potter level, magic. And a lot of that is what people believe. And I don't do that. I like it to be, I think it's more accessible. I think more people could benefit from these things if they stop seeing it as, start seeing it like a role play. In fact, pretend it's real, just play with it, and then see if your life doesn't change for the better, and just keep yourself grounded in your reality. And then somewhere in the middle, you'll find the truth. You'll realize that the role playing was real on some level, that there is something real about the metaphysical, that it's not just in your head. It goes way bigger than that, because even what you think is in your head is just in your head. So
yes. So if I've understood from your model, whether we was to be dealing magically with egregores or with spirits doesn't really matter, because there's a spectrum from one to the other, just like there's spectrums on everything else. And this act of externalization, so that you can communicate with bits of your self, stroke egregores, stroke other entities, which, if the divine is everything, of course other entities are little bits of you, and you're a figment of my imagination and I'm a figment of yours. Mm-hmm. But you get to use the one curse that is down here, that being that curse of duality, that curse of separation. You get to use that exactly for what it's for. That sort of, is it that Virgo aspect of analyzing everything? before you then have to work hard to put it all back together from where you took it apart from in the first place.
I mean, it's a very, and you touched on a couple of things I want to talk about, but you bring up a very important thing that's found in most of my favorite metaphysical spiritual traditions, which is the idea that this reality is manifest in play. It's not a curse. It's been done. You're not even learning anything. Even learning something is a form of play. If you've ever really done any kind of research on neurology of learning, you find that when we learn something, it's the same, almost the same centers of our brain activate than when we laugh. You know, when we laugh, we are laughing because we're enjoying the process of learning. This is why a joke, we laugh at it because we actually learn something unexpected that makes us laugh. You know, it's an unexpected trigger that causes laughter. And some of the same neurology activates when you learn a new thing. This is why some people are addicted to learning things. And to them, it's as much of a joy as listening to a comedian all day. And so this sense of improvement and growth and all of that is sort of, you know, part of a delusion. You know, there's nothing to improve. Okay, you're already perfect. Yeah. You've just simply limited what you think you are to something imperfect, which is a lie. You're already perfect. This idea of growth is actually just, it's not even progress. It's nothing like that. You are simply enjoying a ride. And what makes the ride more enjoyable is the pain that starts it off and the pleasure that follows. So you have to fail in order to enjoy success. You can't just have success all the time. You have to struggle. So this duality naturally emerges when we separate through ignorance. So imagine that there's an infinite divine center that knows all, is all, can do all, can be all, etc. Take the Baphomet. I'm sure you're familiar with that symbol. The Baphomet is the union of, there you go, beautiful.
For anybody wondering.
Yep, the Baphomet. So the Baphomet is a symbol which represents a union of all opposites inside a being that is basically supposed to be you. You're actually the Baphomet, if you understand, in my opinion, if you understand the symbol. So you're the union of all opposites, but in a way that's separating it all. You're going like this: the heavens above and the world below. So you're objectifying things in a dualistic way. You're separating them out. But the real true higher self is a union of all opposites without that objective separation. Imagine a universe, if you will, where all light and dark are equally present in each other. All hot and cold are collided. All here and there becomes one place. All before and after becomes one time. Such a reality would have absolutely no relevance. You wouldn't be able to imagine it. You couldn't consider it. You couldn't see it. It would be literal oblivion. Well, where do you think you go every night when you go into your deepest sleep? You go to that oblivion state. Literally, reality stops. It literally collapses back into its true state, which is perfect union, which cancels everything out. All the numbers cancel out, and you come back to a perfect emptiness, a perfect gap, which is chaos. The real meaning of chaos is gap, void, emptiness. Brahman means the same thing. So you come back to a perfect oblivion state, which is a zero state. So this whole I'm experiencing reality thing, that's not reality. It's splitting the hairs of infinity, so that you're only looking at a segment at a time of that infinity and calling that a reality.
I have something to add on this point, and I would not so much use infinity, coming from, you know, physics and astronomy at uni and so whatever. So it's got a very defined meaning for me. And in terms of comics, it has another very defined meaning. But I would say eternity, because you've slipped in my model that I had loads of things I was going to say about it, but that time is just another axis on a graph. Mm-hmm. And we just get to enjoy that period of time before we know something, the period of time when we learn this something, and the period of time where we are integrating and using and knowing this thing. And it is laid out as a journey, but that the sum total of us is all three states all at the same time, because time's no more real than anything else.
Correct. And most of the you know, you go to like the Greek Platonic and prior Pythagoras, time was always associated with the number 4, and 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 doesn't exist. 4 is an imaginary number. So 4 doesn't, there is no time. Time is an illusion. We still experience it. So I'm not trying to say your experience of time is, like, don't get out of the way of this oncoming train because it's all an illusion. No. The train's an illusion.
For those people who didn't hear that sequence of numbers or was wondering what you're on about, so you're talking about the Fibonacci sequence.
Correct.
There.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Which has its roots, of course, prior to Pythagoras, but Pythagoras, of course, brings it in. You get the golden triangle, which is actually the pentagram. The one I have here, the upside down pentagram, is actually hygiene. Hygia means life, basically life and purity, if you will. And it's 3 golden triangles that are overlaid, making a pentagram, which was eventually twisted into, I use it as a satanic symbol, but I'm not a Satanist. To me, it's just, I think it looks cool, right? And it gives me interesting vibes, right? So I use it for that. But going back to what I was saying, so when we're talking about time, we're talking about a perceptual experience. We're not talking about a reality. For time, as you said, would be a direction on a graph. Mm-hmm. But even the sense of direction is, in my opinion, probably illusory. And here is why. If you have 2 points in space, okay, so you have 2 points, you have point A and point B. They're 0-dimensional entities. They have no size. They're just literally here and here. The sense of direction is only relevant when you add a 3rd point and you can triangulate position. If there's only 2 objects, you can only have relative closeness, but you even have a problem with that. If they have no size, because they're 0-dimensional point objects, they have no size. So if they get closer or further away, there's no way to measure that distance because you don't have a 3rd observer still. You don't have anything to say, okay, that's that far apart compared to how that was before. It's literally, I see you over there and I feel like I'm over here, and I can't tell that you're getting closer or further away because you have no size dimension. You're just where you are. So we can't even come close to touching. We are literally either touching or not. It's a binary. So there is no sense of anything except for union or not union. So this is what I'm getting at. This is a difficult geometric thing to describe with words, and I'm not a mathematician. I can probably draw it on paper better than I can describe it. But what we find is if we assume that reality, and if we assume reality is a bunch of infinitely small points, which there's a lot of problems with that, but let's say it's true, okay? If reality is a bunch of infinitely small points that are somehow co-adjacent to each other, they're basically touching. The problem we get into with that is if they have 0-dimensional size to them, they can't touch, except for if they overlap. So we return to a non-dual truth again. We return to a monad one more time, okay? So what I'm hinting at here is that this idea of time and space, space-time, which is supposed to be considered as one thing, we think of space as having 3 directional dimensions. Those directions would be illusory, okay? Because we're literally only saying what I said before about the 2 points. Let's add that 3rd point in. There is no such thing as forward, back, left, right, and up and down. There is only my perceptual distance between me and another relative object. So if I go into the depths of the Buddhist void, I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a region of space with virtually nothing there, okay? It's one of the biggest expanses of emptiness in the universe that we know of. And if you were to be in the middle of that, okay, far away from everything, it would be pitch black. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't see your own body. It would be so dark unless you had some kind of special, way of seeing. You couldn't see anything. Without a really powerful telescope that we didn't develop until the 60s or 70s, you wouldn't even know there was anything out there. So you're in a place of utter darkness and void. You wouldn't know anything about direction or distance, especially if you didn't have a body that you could feel moving around. If you were just a point in that, you would have no sense of any kind of direction, up, down, left, or right. There'd be no reference points. Without those reference points, all sense of physical reality, as you think of it as having 3 dimensions and time, instantly goes away. In fact, if you're not aware of things happening, the whole notion of time goes away. You can't judge movement without things moving. You can't judge time without something changing, right? So time is really a measurement of change. And what I think is really happening is consciousness is aware of itself. So we're self-aware. And that self-awareness is like a fractal becoming aware of itself. Okay, but that fractal does not have size. It doesn't have time. What it has, and this is where it breaks down linguistically, there's no way to describe something like this because we can only think of it in terms of space and time. So if, I'll play nice and we'll pretend that this fractal has dimensions of up, down, left, right, and time. And within the illusion, there is up, down, left, right, and time. Time is really, like you said, another direction in what I consider a multiverse of perhaps infinite, probably infinite timelines where pretty much anything that can happen does, probably even things we can't imagine, maybe even, you know, realities that go beyond the physics we understand perhaps. In such a reality, if you're the unified consciousness of that, you are, I keep saying you, and that's where we get into trouble. The you that you think you are is a snapshot of that infinite fractal that looks like you, and you go, that's me, that little picture of me, that's me, to the point where you identify with it so much you become that little fractal image. It'd be like, look at a fractal that has what looks like a stick figure of a person in it, and follow that stick figure as you zoom in, and it changes and warps, and eventually, you know, maybe it starts as a point and gets bigger and turns into a stick figure of a man, and then it fades away. That's what you're doing, but time is the dimension that you're looking through. Yeah. So time would be like, to put it another way, D, you exist right now as both a child, a zygote, a sperm and an egg, as all that stuff, as well as a dead man in the ground, and your matter is split out. So why are you here right now? That's the trick. Why are we here right now? And that's what I'm getting at, is that you exist in all of these states, but you are identified here right now. So your consciousness is more like someone reading a book rather than there's a person moving around. So to use a book analogy all the way, imagine reality more like a book that contains everything that can possibly happen in the universe, from the Big Bang till the eventual whatever. This book would be, of course, infinitely big. And your consciousness is reading the story of D right now. And that means that everything that you are is static. You're not actually moving. I'm not moving. The earth isn't spinning around the sun. There's an infinite wave of earth, like, you know, talking about quantum physics here. There's an infinite wave of earth. As our consciousness focuses on that, it collapses that wave function. Now, literally, people take that the wrong way. They think that means that as you observe something, you make reality happen. No, all of those realities exist. You are just focusing your attention on this one moment.
Yes, because the way you said that, I thought you was going for a moment to the Liber Chaos model. And what you're saying has sympathy with that Liber Chaos model. But
it kind of inverts it.
I like to look at it in the Hugh and Everett many worlds theory.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, for example, so let's put it into nice, simple Star Trek terms. We've got the universe, we've got the mirror universe, we've got the one where Kirk died, we've got the one where Spock did die, didn't die, Vulcan blew up, no, it didn't, yes, it did, then it took over everything. And there's all of these, and it's your point of consciousness that is, there's no, if there is a physicality, which by this very, by that duality, of course there is, and of course there isn't. Your consciousness is wandering, going, oh, I'll go to that one now through this decision, and I'll go to this one through this decision, and work where. And as you say about there's an uber me that's reading the book of D right now, and I'm experiencing not reading the book, but I'm experiencing the book being read. Mm-hmm. Then I'm sure I knew what I was doing when I started this. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people can find these sort of ideas quite overwhelming and, oh my God, I'm everything, I'm nothing, and no, it's just too big. I think I need something to drink.
That's my favorite part. I love that part.
But it's whether, I honestly think, you know, all magic aside and egregores and spirits and everything like that, you either have faith that you knew what you was doing when you came here, or you don't.
Mm-hmm. It's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, because every pleasure and every pain you've ever experienced was intentional. It's always your divine will that it happens. But now where does Magick enter into this? So Magick would be like a choose your own adventure type of book rather than a linear book. You can actually jump around in the story and change the story. Theoretically,
breaking the fourth wall.
Yes, quite literally. So theoretically, I could even jump into you the problem is ego. And I don't mean that to say ego's bad. Ego, that's a misinterpretation of many right-hand traditions, is that ego is somehow bad. Ego is what binds us to a specific timeline and identity.
Yes.
The more unbound your ego becomes, the more you recognize, the more your consciousness expands and you realize I'm everything. At first, that's an egoistic decision. Like, I'm everything. Look, I'm bad. I'm the universe. I'm that. I'm this guy. Okay, that's solipsistic. So let's take a step away from the solipsistic that D H Thorne creates the universe. That D H Thorne's created too. D H Thorne doesn't exist either. Let's take a step further back and recognize that instead of saying I'm everything or anything like that, we have to recognize that I manifest everything, and that's a different way of thinking about it. So you recognize that theoretically, if my identity becomes untethered to a specific identity, then in theory I could jump into anything, okay, at will. So once again, we go to sleep at night, and our ego is one of the things that diminishes, right? Our sense of self is still there, but specific ego, our associative ego starts to, like, if you take enough psychedelics, quote unquote, don't do that if we're on YouTube. I can't say you can, but I also won't say don't. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your body. You do the right ones, it turns off that part of your brain which generates the strongest attachments of ego. And you're free to just exist as an entity within a larger space. The same thing happens when you do transcendental meditations, when you do when you experience samadhi or satori, different levels of that experience. This idea of identified ego diminishes or withdraws or even completely switches off, and you begin to feel a deeper connection with more than just this. Okay, that might be because you go so internal that the whole world goes away and you realize that you're everything that you're aware of, or you become so mindful that you feel like you can count the butterfly wing beats at 1,000,000 miles away. Not that you can, but you can feel almost like that. It's such a deep connection with everything. So this feeling of I am here right now fades, and you become, I'm only here and now because I'm choosing to be aware of here and now. So in theory, I could jump to anybody or anything in reality. And the only reason I don't is because I have invested so much of my egoistic habit, and it's a habit. It's not a person. We reify ego like it's a thing. It's a habit. Okay, it's a habitual action that we train ourselves to do, because if we don't, we won't have this experience, and we like this experience. This is a very vivid experience. Remember what I said before about returning to source, if you will, which is kind of nonsense. You never leave source.
It's an oxymoron, really, isn't it?
Right. Somebody scolded me the other day saying, like, well, my thing is different. I don't want to merge back to source. Like, no. The difference is I realize I've never left source. That's the difference. I'm not trying to merge with anything.
Like the Gnostic model. You ascend to the heavens, and the angels look at you and they see themselves in you, and you see yourself in them. Nobody's lost any individuality.
Nope.
No, these egos that we carry, admittedly, they're a suit of clothes. There's and because I was thinking about, as you were saying about when we dream, and our ego of here and now releases its grip slightly, and I often find that another one will pop up and go, hello, remember me, and that can be, oh, it's really nice to see you again, or not. The same experience, I went through a past life, a couple of hypnotic past life regressions. I've got no idea whether the memories that came up were genuine, real. What do those words even mean? Mm-hmm. But I learned that there was that ego here and there was that ego there, and then there was a bit of me that was common to both of them. So I found out what it felt like to be me with a completely different personality. Mm-hmm. So there's, partly of what you're saying, this is for benefit of the viewers. I did a show with a lady called Nicole Stevens, And I'm doing another show with her in a few weeks' time, because she's very much a manage your own vibration to manifest the reality that you want. And I agree that that is, on magical philosophy in the way that we're talking here, absolutely spot on. I also think that it's a philosophy that, when espoused in 30-second Instagram bites, can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's true. That's one reason I don't like TikTok and stuff. Is, I mean, I suppose I could use it to draw more attention to myself, and that would probably be very what's the word? Profitable for me, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't like that kind of scene too much, and I like long form stuff mostly. I'm obviously long-winded, and I do have a hard time, although I can say very profound things very quickly, especially in writing. Generally people go, wow, that's amazing, and then they still don't get it, you know. But what you're saying too is, you know, people think that magic is a way to change the world around them. And my point is that, just like in the Matrix, there is no spoon, there is no reality around you, there is no world. So what are you actually changing? Okay. So when you make your decisions in life, you go through your life day by day, that's a psychiatric pathway to results that could happen. I say psychiatric because our actions are always rational within our field of experience. I can't fly over to the refrigerator and appear over there instantly and grab a soda and drink it. I have to walk over there. Okay. So what I'm describing as mortality is a limitation. If I realize that I technically exist in every position between here, the refrigerator, and back again, and I am here right now, and I want that soda, because I have limited my divine awareness to this little tiny fragment of what I am, instead of just warping my intelligence over there and then back again, I've got to go through these limited steps to do so, because if I don't, it breaks the illusion. Magic, which I actually now prefer to call it sorcery, because the word sorcery means Sutarius, and it means somebody who changes fate, basically. It's like you're changing timelines. I don't personally believe that I can snap my fingers and make things happen. What I think is happening is I'm going to a timeline where the thing I want to see is occurring. So if I do a ritual for wealth, for example, I am theoretically shifting the timeline that I was on, where I was not going to have that wealth, to the timeline where the wealth happens. I didn't change the world. The world goes on the way it's always gone on, because it doesn't move, right? That it's like the book. It's a choose your own adventure. So I've shifted which story I'm reading. I'm not changing the story itself. No, and one thing to go back to that story, I'm kind of all over the place because we're having a good conversation. Going back to the story analogy, for people at home watching this and sort of like wondering about what the heck we're talking about, most people who like to read will tell you that when they read, after a short amount of time, some people it's a few words, some it's a page or two, the words go away and their eyes are going back and forth. They're aware of the book vaguely. They're aware that they're reading. They know that they're reading, but their mind begins to dream what they're reading instead of just words. I mean, you bounce in and out, but I mean, you start having, if you're a visual thinker, you start to see things. If not, you'll hear things. You start to have auditory and hallucinatory, experiences. You daydream it. You daydream the story. So what I'm saying is that at some point, I mean, you can do this even with a short sentence. We've all seen those little memes where you read a sentence and some of the letters are missing and you didn't know it because you just missed it, but you still read it. So what you're reading isn't really literal. Like your brain is processing the implications and turning them into an experience. Okay. So if you can do that, that is like a fractal self-same symmetry of what happens in the bigger cosmic view. Your consciousness is reading the fractal like you're reading a book, and it's dreaming the reality that you're experiencing. So that means everything that you think is real, everything that you've ever touched, tasted, felt, smelled, whatever, those are hallucinatory experiences. They're not real. I use this lighter. It's become like a famous lighter, the green lighter. This green lighter doesn't exist. Okay. Whatever this actually is unknowable. Like in Platonic form, Plato was cool with his forms, but I don't think he went far enough. He went to the imaginary quotient, the imaginary part of what a thing is. But there's something behind that, the thing that inspired the imaginary part of it. So if I asked you, you've seen this now, let me take it away. Imagine it in your mind, okay? Where did you have to go to bring that out? Is there a picture in your brain of a green lighter? No, there isn't. What happens is something in your conscious remembers that a green lighter exists in an intangible form. There's no color, there's no shape, there's nothing to it. It has an awareness of the true essence of what this is. When you bring it to mind, you then bring the representation. This is a symbol of whatever this is. Like that flame isn't really a flame, it's a symbol of the flame. You're seeing an echo of reality all the time. So if you touch your hand, that's not actually your hand you're touching. Okay, there's no, that's a sensation. That sensation is caused by something intangible. You can't actually know reality. It's kind of like if you hear a gunshot, you're not actually hearing the gunshot. You're hearing the sound that the gunshot makes. If you see a gunshot, like the flash of light, you're not actually seeing the gunshot. You're seeing the flash of light the gunshot creates. If you get hit by the bullet, you haven't been shot. Okay, that's not the gunshot. That is the feeling of what a gunshot feels like. The actual essence of the gunshot is unknowable. There is no physicality, there's no material, there's no spiritual, there's none of those things. The spiritual being the egregoric quality, the way you think it looks, sounds, and feels. The physical is also egregoric. Everything's egregore. Everything's tulpa in that sense.
That's another way I like. Well, that's not the way I would describe it, but that for exactly the same image. But I don't say this very often because, again, it's one of those things that it depends upon. We can have a discussion about mental health, and things can get misinterpreted, like anything in the religious or magical or even scientific fields can get misinterpreted by various people.
Yeah, like people who like to take quantum theory and turn that into an excuse for how you could levitate objects with your mind, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But all things are fictions. It doesn't mean they're any less limiting, and it doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to put my Superman cape on, because of course I own one, and go outside and, up and away myself. But there's this, all of this is a fiction. And that is beautiful in and of itself, I think, because
you're a fiction, I'm a fiction, my mother's a fiction, my dog's a fiction, but we're fictions that are masks for something that is, and I like to use these words, intangible, enigmatic, unknowable, completely abstract. We're like, I forget who it was. I love this. I think it's Donald Hoffman, I think is his name. And he's a panpsychist, which I am not a panpsychist, although I do have a lot of sympathy for it. His point was that the reality we see is like a desktop operating system for something that's completely unknowable to human minds.
I know the guy you're on about. Yes. There was a talk about it, wasn't there?
I think it was a TED talk. Yeah. And he's also part of the Science and Non-Duality Forum and some other things. Which I love that website and their work. I love Rupert Spira. He's probably one of my favorites currently that are active, besides myself, of course. But Donald Hoffman, I'm pretty sure that's his name. He had specified, like, when you look at your computer screen, you've got like an icon of a file. Well, there's no file on your computer. There's no trash bin on your computer. There is literally just, electromagnetic patterns on a mechanism that are read by another mechanism and then processed by yet another mechanism. So there is no file on your computer. So that is a representation of a bit of data. Even data is a reification of a pattern. Okay. So what happens is, on your computer screen are these things that represent things that you can't understand. If you tried to understand your computer on a literal level, your mind would explode. You couldn't handle all of what it's doing right now. And I got a pretty beefy computer, so my mind would explode really big. You couldn't even understand what's going on in a calculator, okay, for the most part. I mean, sometimes it takes teams of people to create a simple wristwatch these days. They're that complicated. So what we see is a symbolic, syntactical, allegorical representation of something that is intangible and unknowable on a computer screen. The exact same thing is happening here. you think that this is a real object. You think this is a quartz crystal. This is not a quartz crystal. This is just what you call whatever this is. Okay. And it has no name. It has no quality to it. Even the sense that it's solid is a holographic thing. There's nothing solid to this. It's fields of force, and fields of force are only real when they interact with each other and resist each other in some way. If the force fields go the same direction, there is effectively no field of force at all. If I could somehow the substance, the fields of force of my hand, if they could be aligned to be flowing in the same direction as it, I could go right through it and I wouldn't even know it was there. This is where we get into so much trouble as people living in a material world. We reify these shadowy illusions, and to do so, we have to egoistically associate with things. We have to, when I say that I'm D H Thorne, what I'm really saying is I'm not you. What I'm really saying is I'm not that star in that tree. By naming and making assertions about what something is, you're denying its union with everything else. That's an egoistic habit. Even when you externalize that and say that this is a crystal, by doing that, by declaring this is a crystal, I'm denying that it's me, okay, by indirect means. And if this can be a crystal, then I can be D H Thorne.
And there is also a statement on the magical power of naming.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And sometimes I like to frame it in a negative way. By naming everything, you're deepening the illusion.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with illusion. I think that if, when we are ready to wake up and never dream again, we'll just stop. I don't think that we're trapped here. I don't think that this is a thing that's bad. I think that we are willfully living in, analogously, a matrix. Okay. I don't think there's literally machines that are feeding off of us and all this crap. We are willfully living in a matrix of our own creation every day when we open our eyes. This is the deepest sleep you can be in the spiritual sense. When you wake up every morning and you have to take a crap and brush your teeth and pay your bills, that is the deepest form of sleep. And you can even go a little deeper. Like if you're in a crisis and somebody got a gun to your head and you're like, oh crap. And you're really just in that moment of absolute ego terror. Okay, that is the deepest, because you don't even realize that you don't matter, you don't exist. This is a dream. You're so deeply identified with the illusion. That's the deepest sleep.
And that can sound so nihilistic to some people, for you to say that statement that you don't matter, but you don't matter. I don't matter. That essential bit of me that I had the tiniest glimpse of by feeling what another me felt like with a different personality. And so it was like that bit of me that was looking at the two, my current life and whatever life I was linking to at the time. Even that, it's a shadow, something on the horizon, shadow on the cave wall, that sort of thing.
Correct. They represent something that is real. It all represents something real. That is not, I'm not an idealist that says you make it all up and it's not real. What I'm saying is that the idea of a material or an ideal being real are both illusory, but they both point to something that is real behind everything. And that does matter. So your egoistic identity doesn't matter. No. But the thing that it represents does, and that is the same thing that is in everything. And when we say it matters, it means not that you have to go out and preserve it, but you can. I welcome people to do so. That's not the problem. What means is that everything is seeking its own bliss. Everything is seeking its bliss, and bliss is inevitable, just like suffering seems inevitable. Bliss is inevitable. Okay. And what everything is doing, even down to a little subatomic particle, is it's seeking its bliss. It's seeking its resonance. It's seeking to just fulfill itself, and that is the bliss. Okay, so there is no objective meaning to life in a human sense.
I love that idea that you suddenly relate it to subatomic particles, because it's just like the basic chemistry idea of electron, which we also know is nonsense nowadays, but however, it still works as a way of describing things. but electrons settling into specific energetic orbits, thus creating the valency, you know, positive, negative charge or what have you, that each electron will settle to its own orbit and its own place in relation to all the other parts of that one atom. So everything is relational, transactional, and that's where you get the bliss from that. But the bliss that you're talking about here is something a little bit more eternal, instant, and profound, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. And it's indescribable in the sense that, you know, there's no words. There's no words to really describe it, because words are themselves syntactical illusions. So if I try to, even the word bliss puts the wrong spin on it. You think happiness, you think, oh, everything's seeking its happiness. No. Happiness is an echo of bliss, yes, but so is pain. You know, pain is bliss too. Pain is experience. Pain is validation. It's fulfillment. It is, and so bliss is an indescribable thing, but you know it when you've experienced it, and we've all experienced it. It's just that, you know, a nihilistic person expects that there to be an objective meaning to things. But the problem is they expect that meaning to be relatable to a human being. They expect that meaning to be save the whales or have a nice day or something stupid. The objective meaning of reality is to just experience it, because it's not real. It's, you know, if you go and you play Legend of Zelda, what's the meaning of Legend of Zelda? Well, to have fun playing a game. That's it. You know, that's it. That's literally it. Well, that's what, you know, and people feel robbed of something when they find out that there's no objective meaning, because they've externalized their reality so much that if there isn't something external to give them meaning, they feel lost and empty. And it makes of course, you have benevolent nihilism, which is closer to what I prescribe, which is a feeling of, if there is no objective meaning to reality, that means I am liberated in the Luciferian sense of anything goes, and it's up to me to decide what is good and bad and what is proper and so I choose to follow the golden rule and treat people as they want to be treated and all of that stuff, because it makes me feel fulfilled, because I recognize namaste, I recognize the divinity in all things. So will I destroy an enemy? Of course I will, because I feel like to let them prosper even for a moment hurts everyone more. If there's a rapist on the loose, I don't want them to run around being raped, because I feel like they're hurting more of me. So they're going to get a curse or whatever. And it might be a very, very rabid one. I might hit them very hard. I don't look at it and go, oh, I'm going to be as nice as I can be. No. Because like when I was a child, I needed to get spanked sometimes. That's part of, you know, I mean, a wolf doesn't take pity on a rabbit, a spider doesn't take pity on a fly, and they're not sinful beings for not doing that. Part of my being is to understand that since this is an illusion, my choice is what gives it meaning. Now, I choose to be what people might call a good person, but then I do things that go the other way, you know, because I'm a balanced being. I don't want to get too far into the morality stuff, but morality is really just a personal choice.
It's a sliding scale, and again, it's that dichotomy, that othering, that same and other, as you see in certain aspects of the Hellenistic philosophies, the difference between the same and other. I mean, one way I think the same way as you, because I see that I have the freedom to assign the meaning to my actions, my life, my existence, what have you. I have that, and to a great extent, it comes out in the wash and it'll all be meaningless in the long term, but there's, you know, there's going
when all opposites collide in union, in the end, then it literally loses all meaning. Okay, so you're here to give it meaning for the time being.
Yeah. Although I'll ask about in the end. That's a very linear time way of looking at it.
Good point. Yeah, that's a linguistic error, of course. We have to say these things because, you know, I can't just go, you know, and
I like to think in the whole with a W. This is but
yeah, in the sum aggregate, all opposites unify.
Yeah.
And it is all that. So, you know, here's a thought experiment for people at home. Okay. When you're trying to understand what I'm talking about, how you could be divine and not know it and all of this, people hearing me, I've had a lot of people come to me and say, Thorne, you're full of crap. You're saying you're God. No one can be God, and blah, 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 blah. And I say, okay, well, let's walk it back. Let's start with the hypothetical question that's found in a lot of, theocratic, places. It's a paradoxical question. Can God create a rock that God cannot move? So can an all-powerful God, when we say God, we mean like omniscient, omnipotent, and all that. Can God make a rock that cannot move? Now, I'm going to ask you, you seem like a very enlightened guy. Let's see if you have a similar answer to me. What do you think, D? Can an all-powerful God make a rock that God cannot move? And if so, or if not, how and why? Explain your answer.
If he's creating it and bringing it into being, is that not a movement in and of itself? Because it's moving from not existing to existing.
Sure. Yep. So that would be a yes. He can create
and
it.
a no. Because no, of course he can't, but of course he can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about as far as I could go with that one.
Okay. So we hit a paradox. If it's an all-powerful God, it can create anything, but then shouldn't it be able to move the thing it made? So if it can create anything,
creation is a movement,
right? But then if it created it, now it can't move it, so that means it can't get rid of it. It's there for, okay, so we hit a paradox. That's the point of the question. The answer to that paradox is actually really simple. If an all-powerful God wanted to create a rock that it could not move, it would manifest the rock. It could be the size of this little piece of garnet, just a little boop. Bang, there's a rock. Very cool. That's a nice rock. Then to make it so it couldn't move it, it would manifest an ant that was too small to move it, or some other little creature. Well, so far it hasn't satisfied the answer yet. It's created the rock, it's created an ant, but it can still move the rock and it can still move the ant. So what does it have to do now? It needs to use its ultimate power to limit its consciousness, its omniscience, through ignorance, avidya, agnosis, limit its cosmic awareness of itself so that it becomes only the little insect that can't move the rock. It forgets that it's the rock and the insect. It forgets that it's God. In so doing, it's created a rock that it cannot move. So how do you satisfy the other end of the equation? Well, isn't it omnipotent and omniscient? Then to fix that, all it has to do is remember that it's God, and then it can start moving it again. So it solves the paradox because it can do both at any time, because time is, of course, an illusion. It can exist in both states simultaneously. So the paradox is solved. This is how, so if what I'm saying is correct, and believe me, it is, because I just...
Well, as the Black Magician, it's a political statement that I am God.
Yes, exactly.
Never mind the namaste stuff.
Right. So are you. Like, I am not God over you. It's that we're both God. Okay.
Yes.
And I am the God of this incarnation, and you're the God of that incarnation. And
Absolutely.
There is no God above you. I don't care if somebody puts a gun to your head. You still get to choose whether, how it up to the last millisecond, you have a choice of what happens. So you have incarnated. What it means to incarnate is not to, your body isn't holding you. You don't own a body. The body doesn't own your soul. Your body doesn't, you don't have a soul. Saying you have a soul would be like saying a light has illumination. They're the same thing. You don't have a soul, and you don't have a body either. The body is something you've fixated your attention on to the exclusion of other things. A good way to sort of understand this. You can all do this. You can do this right now too. It's a meditation that I do frequently. Pick a body part, say like the tip of your finger or something you can feel really good, and try to focus all of your attention on that body part to the exclusion of as much of the rest of your body as you can. A good way to do this, if you don't know how to do it, would be drop something on the floor where you can't see it, and then try to find it just by feeling it with your eyes closed. And when you do that, you'll realize that your conscious attention shifts so much into the tips of your fingers that you completely ignore most of what's happening, if not everything, in other extremities. We do this all the time. And if you really think about it, you've probably done it today. We do this all the time. So if you can shift your conscious attention to that degree within your own body, okay, that again is a self-similar fractal example of what consciousness is doing with you.
Yeah.
It's shifted its attention into what you think of as a body. Of course, the misunderstanding is that you're paying attention to your body. What you're really paying attention is to the electrochemical signals in your brain. You're not even paying attention to your body. You're paying attention to the biophotonic electrical signals that are cascading in your brain, whatever they really are. That's what you're paying attention to. And you're watching that and dreaming the rest of this in your higher. So we think that consciousness happens in the brain. It doesn't. The brain is more like a radio transmitter receiver. It's a transceiver more than anything. It's not causing consciousness and it's not responsible for consciousness. But if the brain gets destroyed, consciousness can't manifest through that in this world. It has to pick some other avenue. It's like a dead end for that consciousness at that point. So the brain doesn't even generate the imagery that we see. Like, when you look at an object, that image doesn't exist in your brain at all. It's just a pattern flickering around. So where does that image exist? Right? Science has no clue. That's the hard question of consciousness. Where does the sunset actually happen when you look at it? It certainly doesn't seem to be happening in here because we can't find any part of the brain that actually has a picture in it. So we don't know. So something is interpreting these signals and turning it into a visual picture or experiential picture. That's divinity. That's God. That is it. That's Tat Vamasi. That's what you are. So that being said, you don't need to have all these physical stimuluses to experience other things. So when you're telling me about your past life experience, one of the things that my knee-jerk reaction to want to shout out to you is, number one, we are reincarnations of each other.
Yes.
You're either a past or future incarnation of me too. This other life that you imagined or dreamed or actually had, my understanding, if I'm correct with the many worlds multiverse understanding, is that very likely it may not have been here in this paradigm of reality that we think is real. It may have been in a completely different. It's all one verse.
In another many world of Hugh and Everett, or in, and also conversely, it's happening right now because there's no such thing as any other time than now.
Correct. Time is an illusion, and we see it as a passage. Just like if you sit on a train long enough, you can get the feeling like the world's going by, but really you're moving. And this is one thing I love about Einstein's relativity stuff, even though I don't know if I fully subscribe to quantum stuff, because part of me likes the ether and the quantum still can work with that. But, one of the things I liked about Einstein's work was he did what I do, and maybe he didn't do it. Maybe he copied somebody. I don't know. Einstein's theory of relativity is relevant to observers. He never tells you what an observer is, though, right? He never specifies what the observer actually is. So he would say time doesn't move. The observer is having a shifting of perspective. Okay. When you jump off of a building to the reference frame of the observer, you're not falling. The world is rising up to hit you. From the perspective of an observer, time moves past you. Okay. But because we externalize everything, we think time moves, but it's not. Consciousness is moving through that dimension, causing the illusion of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very important thing to realize. When you figure that out, that means everything's happening at once because everything's already happened. It's already a static field of potential. And when you talked about the electron, I like that because what's an electron? Well, you know what an electron is? That's an electron. It's a momentary detection within the field that says that's where this little bump of the field existed. We found the bump, and we found that
it's most likely to exist.
Right. And it exists, actually, all of it. It exists in that entire field. The more quantum you go, the more you're actually seeing the multiverse as truth. The smaller you look and you realize everything's a hazy field, you go, why is that? I thought it was right there, or right there. It's moving too fast. No, it's not because it's moving too fast. It's literally potentially in all these places, and only, think of it like this. Your hands are going like this, and then up, you found the electron. But the position of the electron isn't there. It's in all of those places. The electron is the detection, is what I'm getting. What we call an electron is a reification of a detection. When we reify a detection, if you know what the word reify means, it means it's not really real, but we think of it as real. We turn it into a noun. for linguistic purposes. This electron that you call an electron, you're really talking about an electron phenomenon, electron detection. There is no such thing as an electron. There's no such thing as a proton. There's no such thing as any of these particles. They're just detections of something. Again, something unknowable, enigmatic, intangible, indescribable. It's just ways of detecting. That's all.
And detections that can only occur by interfering with the system.
Interference patterns.
You can only tell a position or the velocity. But I love that you brought up Einstein, because I saw something the other day that I was like, oh my God, how have I never worked this out? But the statement of the theory of relativity, if time slows down the faster that you get to the speed of light, and how I'd never twigged this, I don't know, then all light is existing in one instant.
Light actually does not experience time. That is
precisely, and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful statement in and of itself. Never mind whether we're looking at it in the physics or a magical, just in and of itself. That is such a beautiful statement by the universe, fictional as it may be. You know,
it teaches us something about the higher perspective. This is why science denies all the things that I talk about, yet they talk about the same thing the same way, just using different words. And I'm just going, if you could just make that little intuitive leap to understand that the ancient mystics knew what you're trying to figure out, they just didn't know all the mechanics of it, but they knew when you get your grand unified theory, it's going to be it's going to be the same thing. I predict it's going to be basically the same thing. It's just going to be a mathematical version of it. But yes, and the juice that I think really, that gets pumped into this is, when we're talking about, light not having time, not experiencing time, is to realize that in a geometric sense, okay, think of it this way. If I go that way, I can't go that way anymore, right? If I go directly that way, I'm not going that way, right? So there's sort of, you can only go in one direction at a time, if there's directions at all. I can only go forward or backwards or up or down, left or right.
The appropriate phrase there being at a time.
At a time. Well, now let's add time as just another direction. Okay. So let's say I want to go up, but I also want to go straight. Well, then I got to go on a diagonal up and straight. So time is like that. If I want to go as fast as possible through time, I actually have to be perfectly still in three-dimensional space. Then I will experience time at the fastest possible rate, which is true. The slower you move through space, the faster time flows around you. We see this with satellites. The faster they go, they actually feel like they're lagging, and all of a sudden we see time changing for them. And the same thing's in inverse. So if you're moving, then you're not moving through time as quickly. Okay. So a particle of light, which is not a particle in my opinion at all. I think it's all an echo, a wave in the ether, the quantum field, the light field, whatever you want it to be. That's not important to me. I see it as just a wave in whatever light is. And it's a rate of propagation. It has nothing to do with, the universe says you can only go this fast, because it's literally, the more tension an object has, the quicker it vibrates, right? If you hold the string really tight, it vibrates quicker. If you let it be loose, it's got a different wavelength. It vibrates slower. Light is just a perturbation in a field or the ether or whatever it is. It's a perturbation in it. And then the photon is that clap of interaction. So the photon is when it interacts. Otherwise, it's a wave. And that's the wave particle duality problem.
Yeah.
So of course, when you observe it, there it is now. So now it's got a wave from there. It's still all the same light. Light didn't appear when it hit something. Light was always there in this wave. So the propagation of light, of course, it experiences no time, because the wave is moving as quickly as possible through that three-dimensional frame as it possibly can. So it doesn't have any energy left to go through time, right? But if something is stationary in space, then it has all the energy it needs to go through time. You can experience time all in an instant, or time slows down, I guess would be the appropriate thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm probably screwing it up because I am not a physicist. I just play one on YouTube. But when we're watching an electron, they travel at the speed of light. We're watching a photon, they travel at the speed of light. When we're watching any particle materialize, it materializes at the speed of light, even though the particle itself may not move that quickly. So, when you detect anything, it collapses at the speed of light. Why is that? Why does it collapse at the speed of light? Why does any of this happen at that speed? Again, what if consciousness is what's moving at that speed? What if consciousness moves at the speed of light, and it propagates through mediums, and so I don't want to get into all that because that's actually more objectification.
We're getting quite deep, and if we've got anybody left still watching, their heads will hurt by now. So
possibly. Let's give them more credit. Maybe they're going to go, actually, in my science class, Thorne, you're wrong. Maybe they're going to know better. They're going to give me some hate mail today, and I go, look, I'm just spitballing here, man. It's two guys talking, one with the Superman and one with the thing. What do you expect? It's going to be spitball bullshit. It's going to be just fun. Just relax.
So in conclusion, you are not real.
Right.
You are God.
Correct. Yeah.
And
so are you, and you, and you, and you, and all of you, and little Jimmy in the back. It's you too.
And half the idea to be here is to experience it. Now, with my initial plan for this video, you've completely not done that whatsoever with the looking at the Shem HaMephorash and the Goetic spirits as
I don't even know what that is.
Entities, but you have also managed to prove all of astrology having a validity, because the as above, so below, as within, so without, because none of those terms mean anything. It's all the same thing. So just as we wear our personalities like clothes, we choose our birth chart like a jacket.
And let's not assume that in my opinion, let's not assume that the planetary stuff is making us do anything. Like when people say, I was born this way, so it has to be that way. Right. It's a description. It's a correlation without causation. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how, so it's useful, just like, it's useful to know that, I don't know, it's Tuesday, that'll decide whether you go to the, but you can still choose not to go to the bank on Tuesday, even though you have it on your calendar. Like, you don't have to do that, but it is, but keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off. I do that a lot.
No, that just goes to prove my point. So like I say, I didn't achieve my end goal of exploring them as astrological entities, but this has been absolutely fascinating. But I think we're running around an hour and a half now.
So I could talk for days, but no, I hear you.
Where can people find you?
Oh boy. I have a link tree, which I guess I'll give you to link, but I think it's Linktree D H Thorne. I'll have to give you that. You can find me on YouTube just by searching me on YouTube for that. You can Google my name at this point, D H Thorne. I'm pretty well, known on Google, I guess. I have several books in print. I don't go this deep into metaphysics in my books. The one I'm most known for, if I can rip it out without knocking half my display down, is either Become the Maelstrom, which is my first book, or this one, which is a little bit more, it's a little bit more edgy. It's Shadownomicon, and it's kind of dark, so you can't see it too good, but it's an exploration of the shadow people, that urban myth and legend as I understand them to be.
We need to talk about that at some point.
Sure. I understand them to be, like I said before, about how we externalize what's internal. So shadow people are an externalization, in my opinion, of your shadow archetypes. Okay. Whatever's going on behind the curtain that you don't recognize. And the more traumatized you are, the more they can be externalized into beings that you can interact with, or not necessarily traumatized. Traumatized is the natural way it happens. If someone's abused, shadow people might just be around them. They might see them more, okay, because they're dissociating with their suffering, and so they might see them, and they might manifest in a way that others can even see for you. It's happened. People do seem to be able to see them, literally.
Yeah.
I can't, again, I don't like superstitious belief, but I can't deny reports that appear true. I've had my own experiences like that. Whatever's actually happening, don't know, but people see them. Okay, maybe they're all seeing them in their mind's eye and they just agree on where, or maybe they're literally physical there and you can see them. I don't know. But you can work with them. They're dangerous because working with your own shadow without a safety net's always dangerous. People use the cliff auth for that. People will use a million other different ways of doing it. This is just another way, and it utilizes something that people can externalize their shadow and learn to work with them in a magical way that's both theurgistic, but you can even use them for different things. Once you've learned to integrate the shadow effectively, you can use that shadow egregore, that shadow archetype, to cast spells, if you will, to do things with that resonate with that shadow. So that's a book that I'm kind of pushing again, because it's one of probably my most unique one. Become the Maelstrom is my first one, which is a full, I don't know, it's a big, and it's, hey, you caught that on camera, right? It is a, let me get it. Here we go.
I've been admiring that lamp all the time as well.
It's a cool lamp too. I'm glad it could take a hit. It's a big book. You know, this is my flagship book, and it's the first book I wrote. So give it a little bit of be gentle. You know, don't assume that it's perfect. It's very full of errors and this, that, and the other thing. And I am working on more books. So that's what I'm famous for, is those 3 books and my YouTube channel. So if people are interested, just Google me or search me on YouTube, and you'll find me very easily. You may love what I have to say, you may hate it, and I kind of like being that guy that kind of gets both. So,
well, it will be a pleasure to have you back on. So yes, let's discuss that on another time, and on another time, which I was hoping to get to on this video, because of the way you've described your experiences and say about working intuitively. I was going to ask you your origin story, because I've got a sneaking suspicion that you and I may have a few things in common with origin stories as well. So, but we've been going for long enough, so that has to be another show. So DH's details will be down in the description below. Feel free to subscribe to his channel. It is well worth it. And subscribe here while you're here.
You might as well, right? If you're going to be here.
That's why I get big names like this. Oh no, that side. That's why I get big names like this fella on. You know, I want the subs.
One day you'll get Superman on, and then it's all over. Then you'll feel so fulfilled, and you'll be so happy. Superman's a great egregore.
I won't need anything else then, would I? So DH Thorne, thank you very much. And yeah, there's still some monthly readings to come out, and there's actually plenty more interviews coming up over the next month. So stay tuned. Cheers.
Thank you very much, man.